The curator of the Louvre Museum, named Jack, was suddenly attacked by an albino monk. He quickly activated the security system behind the painting. The iron gate fell down and blocked his way. However, the monk had a gun, so he was still able to force Jack to reveal the location of something. After the monk knew that what he wanted was under the rose path in the Opus Church, he coldly shot Jack and left. Before Jack died, he tried to leave many clues on his own body for others to decode and find the culprit. The reason he did not call the police was because this matter was related to the power of God. On the other side, Professor Robert, who specializes in researching and decoding the secrets of the world, was having a chat with fans. Inspector McCall suddenly appeared, interrupting the autograph session. He told Robert about Jack's death and asked him to help investigate and solve the case. Immediately after that, the two drove to the museum to meet Lieutenant Bizou. He was the one in charge of the case. Together, they deciphered the symbols that Jack left at the scene before he died. Bizou suggested that it was related to Satanism because the victim had a pentagram drawn on his chest, but Robert denied it. He said it was just a symbol of Venus. Bizou then showed Robert some jumbled numbers and words that meant, "Oh cruel devil, oh lame saint." After Robert thought for a while, he didn't know what Jack meant by leaving these things behind. At that moment, a girl from the decryption team named Sophie appeared. She announced that the numbers were actually the reversed Fibonacci sequence. At the same time, she gave Robert a phone, which contained a message from the US Embassy. In fact, this was a secret recording that she used to warn Robert he was about to be in danger with Lieutenant Bizou. Sophie and Robert secretly met in the bathroom. At that time, Sophie revealed that she was Jack's niece, and the words sent to Robert at the scene had been erased by Bizou. That's why he considered Robert the #1 suspect in the case. Once he was considered a suspect, he would be imprisoned until he confessed. Of course, Robert couldn't just sit there and wait for death, so he cooperated with Sophie. She threw the tracking device that the secret police had hidden on Robert into a garbage truck. Sure enough, this trick fooled Bizou. He and his colleagues saw the GPS moving and immediately chased after it, while Robert and Sophie stayed at the scene to continue searching for clues. Meanwhile, at a church in Paris, the murderer who killed Jack, Silas, was in contact with the mastermind. It turned out that they belonged to the Opus Church and were looking for the Holy Grail. It was a sacred object that was believed to hold the power of God. After Silas finished his report, he began to perform the ritual of the church. Silas, in the name of those who serve God, tortured himself with a penance circle and a whip. He believed that this would atone for the deaths he had caused. As a child, Silas was a victim of domestic violence. While protecting his mother, he had accidentally killed his father with a knife. Silas had been then imprisoned and saved by Bishop Oringarosa. From then on, he had become Oringarosa's subordinate. Now back in the present, Silas went to the Sunpai Blue Church to find the Holy Grail. He asked Sister Lucia about the rose path. After Silas got the information he needed, he sent her away. Silas then used a stick to break the ground below, but all he found was a stone with the inscription, Job 38 verse 11. Silas angrily asked Sister Lucia about the meaning of this stone. Sister Lucia explained that it was a verse from the Bible that said, "This is as far as you can go." Silas realized that he had been tricked and was so angry that he used a rock to kill Sister Lucia. On the other side, Robert and Sophie began to decipher the riddle at the scene. After they arranged the letters together, Robert realized that it was the name of the famous artist Leonardo da Vinci, so the two immediately ran to the Mona Lisa and found the next clue. Robert then quickly found the solution in the same way. When Sophie touched the second painting, a cross with a lily flower fell to the ground. At the same time, Bizou on this side realized that he had been tricked, so he immediately contacted the police officer in charge of the scene. The police immediately went to check the museum, but when he arrived, there was no one there because Sophie and Robert had already driven away a long time ago. At this time, the two of them thought about the lily symbol on the cross. It reminded Robert of the people of the mysterious Sire Church. Even Isaac Newton and Leonardo da Vinci belonged to this church. They were the ones who protected God's power on earth. Before they could say anything more, the police appeared right in front of them. At this time, Sophie had no choice but to turn around and run away. Just like that, she and the police created a chase on the street. However, Sophie's driving skills were very good, so she easily took Robert away from the police. After the two of them escaped the pursuit, they drove to the city's central flower garden to rest. Here Robert tells Sophie, a story about the war between the Knights Templar and the pagans. They had fought for thousands of years with the sole purpose of winning the powerful Holy Grail. Then Sophie realized that the symbol on the cross is the address of Jack's secret safe. Soon after, the two take a taxi to a private bank. Here they were warmly welcomed by the manager named Vernet. He introduced the bank's operations to the two. Customers came here to rent safes, and the shortest rental period was 50 years. They would then receive a key and a 10-digit password. If the customer entered it incorrectly once, the system would automatically lock the safe forever. Sophie guessed that the number that Jack left at the scene was the password, so she decided to try it. As expected, her deduction was correct. But when the two of them had just retrieved the box, the bank manager came in to announce that the police had arrived. It turned out that Bisou had previously issued a wanted notice for Sophie and Robert, so the people had called to report it. Vernet wanted to ensure the safety of his customers, so he secretly used a special vehicle to deceive the authorities, and he successfully took Sophie and Robert away from this place. At this time, Sophie opened the safe and found a decoder box inside. It was made according to Da Vinci's original design. If anyone tried to pry it open, the acid in the box would automatically activate, then the scroll with the information inside would be destroyed. Robert and Sophie had to find a 5-letter word to decode. If they wanted to guess, they would have to try at most 18 million times to get the right result. But when the two of them had not yet thought of a reasonable word, the car suddenly stopped in the middle of a deserted forest. At this time, Vernet revealed his true nature. He rushed in with a gun to rob, but Robert used violence to teach him a lesson. The two then drove away, leaving Vernet in the middle of the forest. Since they couldn't stay near the city center, Sophie went to the house of an acquaintance named Teabing for help. He was a scholar who specialized in the study of the Holy Grail. There, Robert and Teabing argued about the war between the Knights Templar and the pagan monks. Sophie didn't understand anything about this issue, so she immediately interrupted the argument. Teabing told them that the Holy Grail was not an object. It was actually the woman in Da Vinci's painting. Her name was Mary Magdalene. According to Da Vinci, the Holy Grail refers to Jesus' wife. Not only that, before Jesus had been crucified, Jesus and Mary Magdalene had given birth to a daughter named Sarah. This was completely contrary to what Sophie knew, so she refused to believe it. However, this was the truth that the sire monks always wanted to hide. At this time, the TV announced that Robert and Sophie were wanted. Seeing this, Teabing panicked and chased the two out of the house. Now Robert had to reveal that Sophie was Jack's niece, and he also showed the decoder box that proved that Sophie was the successor of the case. She was the one who carried the mission of protecting the Holy Grail. Thanks to that, Robert was able to convince Teabing to let them stay. At the same time, the police found Vernet. Bisou turned on the tracking device on the truck, through which the police found the location where Robert and Sophie were hiding. Therefore, Bisou immediately mobilized forces to Teabing's villa. At the same time, Silas also received orders from the mastermind and went there. While Teabing was decoding the box, Silas took the opportunity to attack Robert. He then pointed a gun at Sophie's head to force Teabing to hand over the box. But Teabing quickly discovered that Silas was wearing a penance necklace. He immediately attacked him in the neck. Silas was hit in the right place and immediately collapsed to the floor. Sophie rushed in and beat Silas, knocking him unconscious. At the same time, Boozy also arrived. He had people break down the gate and rush in. Teabing saw everything through the camera, so he asked the butler to prepare a private plane. Then he went to London with Robert, Sophie and Silas. At the same time, Bishop Oringarosa persuaded the church. He wanted the church to buy the Holy Grail from a man who called himself Bar, because if this thing fell into the hands of others, the church would be in danger. After Oringarosa successfully got the money, he immediately moved to London to meet the keeper of the Holy Grail. On the flight, Robert and Sophie were deciphering the box. Robert remembered the hint Jack had left behind. He found the next riddle hidden in the leather case. It led everyone to a church called Tempo. This was where the tombstones of the Knights Templar were located. On the police side, Boozy was furious that Robert had gotten away. Only then did he dare to confess that a member of the Opus Church had informed him of a murderer. He had confessed to the priest at the Vatican about the murder and that the man's name was Robert. So Boozy had to follow the church's request. He had to contact the British police to arrest Robert, but Teabing had misled them. He helped Robert and Sophie escape before the police arrived. But when the two reached the Tempo church, Silas came from somewhere and used a knife to control Sophie. At this time, the butler also revealed himself. He was Oringarosa's henchman. He snatched the box from Robert's hand and took Teabing hostage. While Silas and his accomplices were not paying attention, Robert and Sophie took the opportunity to escape. On the way, Sophie borrowed a phone. Then Robert went on Google to look up information about the the Holy Grail. The name Alexander Pope appeared, reminding Robert that Isaac Newton was also a member of the Knights Templar. So he took Sophie to Newton's tomb. On the other side, the butler went to Bar to deliver the decoding box. When he thought he was about to receive a large sum of money, he was suddenly poisoned through Bar's wine bottle. It turned out that he was Teabing, the mastermind behind the deception of Robert and Sophie. However, this time, Teabing decided to hold a gun and force them to decode the box. At this time, Robert had no choice but to take on this responsibility. However, he thought for a long time but still could not find the answer. Suddenly, Robert threw the box into the air and let it fall freely to the ground. Teabing saw this and rushed over, but it was too late. He watched helplessly as the secret was buried forever. At this moment, the police rushed in and ordered Teabing's arrest. It turned out that Bizet soon realized that he had been tricked by Oringarosa, because through Oringarosa's work schedule, no one had come to confess to him, so he and Teabing were immediately taken to the police station. Silas, who wanted to save people, was killed by the police. It was thought that the secret of the Holy Grail would be buried forever, but before that, Robert had solved the Cryptex and taken the scroll inside. The final puzzle brought Robert and Sophie to Roslin Chapel in Scotland. This is where the tomb of Mary Magdalene and the secret of Jesus' family are located. Through the blood relations of Jesus, Robert discovered that Sophie was a descendant of Jesus. At this moment, all the people of the Sire Order appeared. Now Sophie could return to her true home. One evening, while Robert was taking a bath, he suddenly realized something and rushed to the Louvre. Robert did not expect that the real tomb of Mary Magdalene was right in the middle of this place, and the secret of the Holy Grail would probably be hidden by Robert forever. In another development, after the unexpected death of Pope Pius XII, the Vatican temporarily closed for 6 days to hold a funeral. They prepared for a conclave to choose the next pope. During that time, the Camerlengo Patriarch would temporarily take over the Vatican. Many Catholic believers flocked to St. Peter's Square. They had come there to attend the Pope's funeral. At the same time, at an underground nuclear accelerator, scientists there were creating a super energy called antimatter. It was not the matter people often heard about, but it could provide energy for an entire country for 100 years. However, antimatter could also be a time bomb because it was 1,000 times more destructive than an atomic bomb. It was stolen by an assassin right in front of Dr. Victoria. Professor Silvano, who had successfully created the antimatter, was killed by the assassin. While Robert was swimming, a Vatican policeman came to see him and asked for his help. Vincent said that 4 cardinals had been kidnapped. They were potential candidates for the new pope. The kidnappers had threatened to publicly execute the 4 cardinals. Starting at 8 p.m. that night, each leader would be executed 1 hour apart. At midnight, they would detonate an antimatter bomb that would blow up the Vatican. Vincent believed that this had something to do with the Illuminati. This was a secret society that had the power to change the politics of a country. Although this society had disappeared for a long time, they had suddenly reappeared in an inexplicable way. Robert realized the urgency of the situation, so he and Vincent immediately set off for the Vatican. Upon arrival, he met the beautiful Dr. Victoria and the captain of the guard, Rita. At this time, the kidnapper sent a message: "We will destroy the 4 pillars. The candidates will be branded with hot irons and they will become sacrifices on the altars of science. Then, we will destroy your church, and we will turn the Vatican into a hell with no way out. A star shines at the end of the road." After listening, no one understood what he was trying to say. However, Robert quickly realized that these were hints to save the cardinals. After Robert listened to it many times, he began to analyze the message. The 4 cardinals symbolized the 4 pillars and the 4 elements: earth, fire, water, and air. Through that, Robert also guessed the locations where the kidnapper would execute the cardinals. He demanded to go to the Vatican's archives to find more clues. However, this place contained the Vatican's state secrets, so Robert was flatly refused. There was another way, which was to get the Pope's consent. However, the Pope had just passed away and the country had not yet elected a new Pope, so at this time, all power would be held by Patrick. He was a priest who had been always close to the late Pope. Robert quickly went to Patrick to ask for permission. Although Patrick was a bit hesitant at first, he finally agreed to let Robert access the Vatican archives. Meanwhile, the police team with sniffer dogs began to search everywhere to find the bomb. Robert, Victoria, and the police chief went to the science temple together. This was where the documents were stored. After reading many books, the clue to the path of light was finally found. The first place was Raphael's tomb. He was a great sculptor. He was buried in the Pantheon, which was the oldest church in Rome. The three of them immediately moved there. When they arrived, Robert and Victoria began to go inside the church to check, but after a while, they realized they were wrong. It turned out that Raphael's tomb was moved here, not that he had been buried here. After Robert analyzed it again, he knew where the tomb was. It was the Chigi Chapel inside the Santa Church, or simply called the Earth Church. This was the first element, and the Earth Church was also the place where the first pope had been assassinated. When the three of them arrived, it was already 7:59, only 1 minute left until the execution. The three of them were in danger of the first cardinal being killed. They rushed in immediately, but when they found the cardinal, he was already dead. His body had been being gnawed on by rats. The first cardinal had been buried in the ground corresponding to the corresponding element. Everyone was shocked when they saw his body. At this time, the meeting to elect a new pope was still going on, even though the four cardinals were not present. The Catholics believed that the four cardinals would be rescued safely, so they lit black smoke to signal the election was suspended. This time, Robert was able to guess the location where the second cardinal had been being kidnapped. It was southwest, a location related to the second element, air. Robert began to climb up and look around, wanting to find the most accurate location. Finally, Robert realized that the location was St. Peter's Square. When the three of them arrived, it was already 8:58, only 2 minutes left for them to find where the second cardinal was. But the place was so crowded that it took them a long time to find. Just as the clock was pointing to 9 p.m., a sudden riot broke out. A little girl accidentally discovered a blood stain. Robert's group found the second cardinal. He was still alive, but both of his lungs were punctured. This was also a sign of the second element, air. At that time, the assassin stood at a distance and watched coldly, then left. In the end, the second cardinal could not escape death. On his body, there was a bloody piece of paper. The content of the paper was about the cause of death of Pope Pius XII. He had been assassinated by poison. While Robert was searching for the third location, when he was about to find a clue, someone wanted to assassinate him. The room suddenly went out of power. This caused the ventilation fan that provided oxygen for breathing to stop working. Robert had to try every way to escape outside. On the other side, Victoria and Patrick went to the coffin of Pope Pius XII to conduct an autopsy. When they opened the coffin, they found that the Pope had been poisoned to death. On this side, Robert found the third location and immediately went to the Santa Church. When he arrived, it was already 9:58. At this time, the fire had already started to burn fiercely. After everyone rushed inside, they found the third cardinal hanging on the cross, and the fire below was trying to burn him to death. The guards tried to save people, but they were stopped by the assassin. This assassin was really formidable. He easily killed each person in the guard team. Even the Vatican police chief was killed by him. Robert ran ahead, so he was lucky to escape. But the third cardinal was burned to ashes. The fire department quickly arrived at the scene to put out the fire and rescue Robert. On the other side, the assassin was also injured after the gunfight with the guards. He was bandaging himself and preparing to kill the last cardinal. At this moment, Robert realized something was very unusual. After reviewing the map, he found the location to kill the fourth cardinal. It was the fountain in Nanova Square. Robert immediately went there with 2 policemen. However, while Robert was searching around, the assassin killed 2 policemen and threw the cardinal into the water. Then he got in the car and fled. Robert didn't need to think much. He quickly jumped in to save the fourth cardinal. With the help of everyone, the final cardinal was saved. At this time, he told the address where he was kidnapped, and this could also be the place where the bomb was placed. That was the chapel of St. Angelo. Immediately, all police forces were mobilized to the chapel to find the bomb, but they searched for a long time but found nothing. At this time, Robert suddenly discovered a secret passage, but it led to the assassin's hiding place. The assassin heard the noise and quickly escaped. At this time, Robert realized that Patrick would be the next to be murdered and the Vatican would explode. At this moment, the assassin appeared and pointed a gun at Robert and Victoria, but he unexpectedly let them go because he had no duty to kill them. Then, he ran down to a car that had been prepared in advance and escaped. Robert and Victoria immediately returned to Patrick's place. At the same time, they saw the assassin's car explode. Perhaps he was killed to be eliminated. A while later, Robert and Victoria also arrived at Patrick's place. At this time, Rita's team was about to kill him when everyone had time to destroy him. Before dying, Rita gave Robert a key. Through it, Robert also determined the location of the bomb. It was placed in the tomb of St. Peter. When everyone found the bomb, it was only 7 minutes away from detonation. Victoria tried to disable the antimatter bomb but failed. Suddenly, Patrick grabbed the bomb and quickly climbed onto a helicopter. Patrick used to be an Air Force soldier, so he could easily control the plane. Patrick decided to fly the helicopter high so that the bomb would not endanger the people below. At the crucial moment, he parachuted down in time. The bomb exploded, creating a beautiful but also very scary scene. However, its destructive power was enough to blow everyone below away. Patrick was lucky to survive. He received applause from everyone. They all shouted his name. The cardinals began to discuss with each other, and they wanted to elect him as the new pope. Although Patrick was very young, thanks to his recent contributions and efforts to save people, everyone finally agreed to make Patrick the head of the Vatican. However, the good drama was not over yet, because the person behind everything had not yet been revealed. The key that Ritter gave Robert led him to a secret surveillance camera. Robert and Victoria immediately rewind the video. They want to see the whole truth again. Now they see the conversation between Patrick and Ritter. It turns out that Patrick was the mastermind, not the Illuminati. He was the one who had set it all up so that he could become pope. He had even heated up an iron rod and held it to himself to frame Ritter. But at that moment, everyone had rushed in and killed him by mistake. And of course, the footage had been delivered to the cardinals. They immediately summoned Patrick. He still didn't know that his plan had been exposed, so he was very calm. But when Patrick opened the door and walked in, everyone looked at him with hatred, and there were also guards around ready to arrest him. Patrick realized that his plan had been discovered, so he immediately ran away. The guards immediately chased after him. Patrick knew that he would definitely die, so he left this world to avoid being tried. The successor of Pope Pius XIX was the cardinal who had been saved at the fountain earlier. Because he didn't want the church to be affected, he kept Patrick's story a secret. He only said that Patrick had been affected by the antimatter bomb explosion and died. Not long after, another mystery was discovered. This was a human bone carved with the image of a three-headed Satan. It was a symbol of the Black Plague, a disease that had killed millions of people in the Middle Ages. Zobrist now created a terrifying virus called Hellfire. It could kill half of the human population in just 7 days. When this virus was released, it would be a disaster for humanity. However, before Zobrist could carry out his plan, WHO had sent people to capture him. When Zobrist was cornered, he chose to leave this world to keep the Hellfire virus a secret. However, humanity was still at risk of being destroyed because the virus has not been found and neutralized. Robert was a famous symbology professor at Harvard University. One day, while walking down the street, he was kidnapped and put in a car. When Robert woke up, he found himself lying in a hospital bed. He felt dizzy and had hallucinations. Not only that, Robert could not remember anything. The female doctor Sienna said that a bullet had missed his head, which caused him to have temporary amnesia. At that moment, an assassin dressed as a police officer rushed in and opened fire. Seeing this, Sienna quickly took Robert and ran away from the hospital. They quickly got into a taxi on the side of the road and escaped, while the female assassin was very angry because she let the two of them get away. Suddenly, Robert's mind saw an image of a mysterious woman dressed in black. Immediately after, a sea of blood poured out like a flood, along with a scene of the city being burned by hellfire. When Robert woke up again, he found himself at Sienna's house. She did not understand what was going on and why Robert was being chased by the assassin. Sienna was about to call the police to report the incident, but Robert stopped her and told her to let him think about it first. Robert felt like he was not in a good mood, so he asked Sienna to make him a cup of coffee. Taking the opportunity, he secretly used her personal computer to log into his email. Inside was a letter from a friend with the content: "I am being hunted like you. Be careful and don't trust anyone." After Robert changed into new clothes, he took out a bloody object from his pocket, but he didn't know what it was. However, Sienna knew it was a biotube. It was used to transport extremely dangerous substances. It was a high-end government product, and it had a fingerprint unlocking function. Robert wanted to prove that this biotube wasn't his, so he used his fingerprint to test it. Unexpectedly, he was able to open it. Inside was a cylindrical object made of human bones. On it was engraved a three-headed Satan. This symbol was related to a black plague that had caused the deaths of millions of people in the Middle Ages. When Robert shook the cylindrical object, he heard a strange noise inside. It turned out to be a Faraday flashlight. Robert immediately placed it on the book and shone the light on the wall. In front of him and Sienna was a drawing of the levels of hell in Dante's Inferno. The images on the drawing were exactly like the hallucinations that Robert often had. It was very possible that this was an omen. A catastrophic pandemic would happen in the future. Sienna felt that this was not normal, so she immediately called the US consulate. Unexpectedly, as soon as she called, the other party asked about the human bone tube and the address where Robert was staying. Robert immediately felt suspicious about how they knew who he was and what he was holding. So Robert quickly lied that he was staying at a nearby hotel. He wanted to see what they would do next. At the same time, the WHO discovered the location of the email account that Robert had just logged in. They wanted to get the searchlight and arrest Robert. At Sienna's apartment, Robert discovered that the letters on the painting were not the same as the original. In addition, the painting also had the words, "The truth will be revealed in the eyes of the dead." From there, Robert and Sienna found the name Zobrist. They looked up the name on Google and found out that Zobrist was an American billionaire, and he was also a famous bioengineer with extreme views. He believed that humans were a virus that was harming the earth. However, Zobrist had mysteriously disappeared 2 years ago. The government was worried that Zobrist was researching an epidemic virus, but he had left this world 3 days ago. At that moment, the female assassin came to the hotel door. She must have been related to the US consulate. Sienna knew that this was not a simple matter, so she quickly took Robert away. Fortunately, as soon as they left the house, the WHO convoy arrived. Immediately afterwards, the agents broke down the door and rushed into Sienna's house, but they found no one there. Robert and Sienna ran out the back door and down the street, where they were discovered by the female assassin. However, when she chased them, the two had already gotten into a car and escaped. On the way, the two went to the National Museum to look for more clues. They saw that the police had blocked off the area. It seemed that the US government was determined to find the two. Behind them, the female assassin was chasing them on a motorcycle. Seeing this, the two quickly got out of the car and ran on foot, but the shortcut was also blocked by the police. So Robert immediately used the bicycle seat to climb over the wall. At this time, the WHO people followed the electric car that Sienna rented and arrived at the museum. They also used a fly cam to search from above. Very quickly, they discovered 2 people running at the lake. Seeing that, Robert immediately led Sienna along the forest path to a shortcut. The two of them sneaked into the main palace together. Here, they found a painting about the crusade by the artist Dante. When Robert looked closely at the painting, real images of that war appeared in Robert's mind. On the green flag were the words, "Circa Trova." To better understand this word, Robert asked a friend who worked in the castle to take him to see Dante's mask. However, when he and Sienna arrived, the mask had disappeared. Immediately, the security guards checked the security camera. What they did not expect was that Robert and his friend had stolen it 2 days ago. Robert was at a loss for words when the police entered the castle with weapons. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Robert quickly grabbed Sienna's hand and ran into a secret tunnel. Robert looked across the building and saw the police searching for him everywhere. He told Sienna that if the police thought they were going down, they should go up. They had to move along the wooden bars on the roof to reach the door leading outside. However, Sienna was afraid of heights, so she accidentally slipped and fell down. Luckily, the ceiling was not broken, so she was able to save her life. However, the fall just now created a loud noise, attracting the female assassin. While Robert tried to move carefully, suddenly the lights behind him shone. Then, the female assassin continuously shot at Robert. He quickly hid behind a wooden pillar to avoid the bullets, but she was still determined to pursue him to the end. Right at the most dangerous moment, Sienna suddenly appeared. She used a crowbar to hit the female assassin's leg. The female assassin fell through the ceiling and died instantly. Agent Omar ran over and saw Robert and Sienna moving through the building's map. He knew that Robert was going east. At this time, Robert and Sienna had escaped from the castle. After that, the two of them blended into the crowd of testers on the street. However, from behind, Omar saw the two of them. He put his walkie-talkie in the trash and secretly followed them. Outside in the vast ocean, the private security organization was watching the video that Zobrist had sent them before he died. He said that he had told everyone a lot about the danger that humanity was causing to the earth, but no one cared about that. So, Zobrist created a virus called Inferno. His purpose was to destroy half of the world's population. After hearing this, Director Malik was extremely angry because he had worked with a pervert like Zobrist, so he would take matters into his own hands. At the same time, Robert and Sienna found Dante's mask. At first, its appearance was very normal, but when the two used water to wipe off the paint on the mask, they discovered a line of text that read, "The sunken palace is where the monster of Inferno awaits." Robert suddenly realized that this was the place where the Black Death epidemic had broken out 800 years ago. At this moment, a WHO agent arrived. He introduced himself as Omar. 2 days ago, he had given Robert a Faraday flashlight to decode and find the hiding place of the Inferno virus. Elizabeth, the president of WHO, who was also Robert's friend, had been trying to use the virus to make money. To reassure the two, Omar even brought out his industry card as proof. So Robert and Sienna followed Omar to the city of Venaria by train. Omar said that he had found Zobrist 3 days ago, but he had already passed away. away, Omar took the Faraday flashlight from Zobrist's pocket. At this time, Robert's hands were covered in itchy rashes. It seemed like he was suffering from some kind of disease. When the train entered the tunnel, Robert suddenly felt a severe headache. In his hallucination, he saw that the person who gave him the flashlight was Elizabeth, not Omar. Robert quickly pretended to lie down on the table so that Sienna could ask Omar to get him a drink to help him recover. As soon as he turned away, Robert woke up and told her the truth. Sienna rushed to Omar and told him that Robert had passed out in the bathroom. He immediately went there and knocked on the door, and Robert hit him on the head with a fire extinguisher. Sienna also sprayed him with some pepper spray. After that, the two quickly ran away from the train. When they reached Veneria, Robert realized that he had gone to the wrong place. Dante's tomb was not here, but in Istanbul, Turkey. But when they looked down, they saw that Omar had also followed. So Robert hurriedly led Sienna to escape through the tunnel. But to get out, they had to crawl through the ventilation. Robert immediately helped Sienna climb up first. However, the iron net was very heavy. They couldn't push it open. The two had to use $100 to ask the woman outside for help. When they just got out, Sienna suddenly slammed the door shut. It turned out that she and Zobrist were lovers. This was something Robert couldn't have expected. Sienna quickly left. Meanwhile, Robert was grabbed by Omar's leg and pulled down, unconscious. When Robert woke up, he found himself in an abandoned house. Under pressure to interrogate the virus's whereabouts, Robert still resolutely refused to say a word, because if it fell into the wrong hands, all of humanity would be in disaster. Omar was angry and was about to shoot and kill Robert when the security company director stabbed him from behind. He said that the wound on Robert's head was not a gunshot wound, but that his head had been cut open to create a fake scene. Robert's memory loss was also due to the injection of a brain-sustaining substance. The rash on his body was just a side effect of the medication. The female assassin had originally only used fake bullets to shoot him. The security company's intention was only to capture Robert, but due to some unexpected events, they had to do it for real. The director apologized for arranging everything so that Robert could help him find the location of the virus. After speaking, he held an iron rod and stood in front of Robert. It turned out that he had carefully hit Omar a few times to disguise the scene. After that, he told the truth about what he was doing, which was to find a way to prevent the virus from spreading. In addition to the Faraday flashlight that President Elizabeth had brought to Robert, she had set the security with Robert's fingerprint, so the director had to ask him. But unexpectedly, Sienna approached Robert first. A moment later, the president of WHO also appeared. Robert immediately told them that the hell virus was in Istanbul. Very quickly, everyone took a flight there. At this time, Elizabeth recounted that 2 years ago, Zobrist had come to her office to ask for help. He had wanted to sterilize humans on a large scale by putting poison in food and drink, but she had not agreed to that. After that, Elizabeth had immediately put him on the blacklist to be monitored. Unexpectedly, he had disappeared for 2 years. The same time, Sienna had arrived in Istanbul. She disguised herself and went to find someone in Zobrist's group. Sienna asked to detonate the bomb to spread the virus before it was discovered by others. Angus agreed and brought a few bombs. On the other side, Robert and the others also arrived at the Istanbul Museum. They were guided by the enthusiastic person in charge. They went to a concert hall. It had a unique design and was located on the red water. In order to prevent the virus from spreading, they also brought the most modern isolation glass cage. At this time, the director discovered that Sienna was also there. He immediately chased after him, but was suddenly stopped by a long-haired man. Although the director could easily control him, he was stabbed from behind by Angus. However, the director counterattacked in time and stabbed the opponent on the spot. But in the end, he was stabbed again by Sienna. This time, the director was really dead. At that time, Elizabeth found the bag containing the hell virus, so she jumped into the water to seal it. Sienna also discovered this, so she quickly threw 2 bombs into the water. When Robert ran over, he saw her holding a detonator in her hand. On this side, the bag of hell virus was being transferred into the glass cage when Sienna pressed the detonator button again, but nothing happened. Therefore, she immediately jumped into the water to activate the bomb herself. The remaining bomb was also affected and exploded. The shock wave was so strong that Robert was thrown into the water. Elizabeth tried to protect the glass cage, but unfortunately her hand slipped and the virus bag broke. Luckily, she closed the cage in time. Suddenly, the long-haired man rushed out from somewhere, grabbed the virus bag, and tried to open the safety lock to release the virus. At the critical moment, Robert jumped down to attack him. The soldiers were also present, but did not dare to shoot because they were afraid of hitting Robert. While the long-haired man and Robert were struggling, he still tried to open the cage to let the virus out. Robert had to use his finger to press on the wound on the long-haired man's neck. Only then did he let go. Just waiting for that, the the police shot the long-haired man dead. After that, everyone hurriedly found the cage and locked it. Fortunately, the virus did not leak out at all. In the end, more than 4 billion people on Earth were saved. The movie ends here. Goodbye, and see you in the next videos.